Okay, so good. All right, so if during the course of the session you wish to say something, feel free to just unmute your mic and go ahead and make a contribution, ask a question, share whatever you have with those who are on. Alternatively, you can put whatever you need to put in the chat as well, and I will read it out loud. So if you know you don't want me to read it out loud, don't put it in the chat. If you have some you want to share it with that you don't want to be read, text me it on WhatsApp. All right. But once it's in the chat, I'll read it out. Okay. So just that was just for housekeeping. What else I want to let you know? Because of the nature of the class, it's going to be a really practical session. So that's why I'm saying feel free at any time to go ahead and just make the comment, ask the question, make sure you're clear on everything that's being mentioned here tonight. I also recognize that many of you are already engaged in Bible study, so this is not me trying to, show off or show up anybody, but it's just a way for all of us to develop and improve. I personally, I re-examine my study methods every year and a half. I take a look at it, and just to ensure that I'm approaching the Bible the right way. I think it's a good practice that all of us can be involved in. Every now and again, just make sure that your hermeneutics is good. Make sure everything is as it's supposed to be, and make sure you're coming to the right conclusions. All right. So what I'm gonna do, first of all, we just want to do a little housekeeping. So I want to share with you, firstly, just a little bit of information on the significance of Bible study. I don't want to spend too much time here. I want to get into the practical stuff really. And so this is why that I don't want to spend too much time here. So why study the Bible? Let's get into this really quickly. A few reasons here. Number one, and this I think is the main reason that I want you to keep in mind when you approach Bible study, is to know who God is. Every time you approach the Bible, how do I see God? If it's an Old Testament book, if it's a New Testament book, if it's a prophecy, if it's a psalm, if it's a part of the law, wherever you go in the Bible, your quest is to know God, because the Bible, according to 2 Timothy, is the word of God. Just a little note for those who coming in, just please mute your mics until you're ready to make a comment. This meeting is being recorded. All right, so this is your main reason right here. All right, all the other stuff comes afterwards, but this here is your main reason to know who God is, because the word of God, it came from him and it reveals who he is, not just his will, but his character. So this main reason right here, to know who God is. All right, moving forward really quickly. All right, to know God's will, what God wants. All right, that's also what you want to keep in mind when you study the Bible. To know who Jesus is, he's a significant person in the Bible. And of course, because God wants us to, God was always interested in people knowing and holding fast to his word. And so that never went away. That desire is still there. And so we ought to study the Bible because, God wants us to. That's something I want you to keep in mind as well. All right. A couple of other reasons here, to avoid doctrinal error, not just for yourself, but you'll be able to detect doctrinal error from, somebody who's, doing a class. If you're in a ladies class, if you're in a children's class, and Bible class, sermon, anything, you will be able to detect not only doctrinal error on your part or on, preacher's part, or just somebody that you may be talking to. Studying the Bible gives you, puts you in a good position to do this, to effectively help others to gain wisdom to navigate life. All right. So again, I believe the Bible is the sole source, all right, to help us in various aspects of life. And so this is one of the reasons, some of the reasons that I think Bible study becomes very significant. If you need these slides, I can make them available to you. So don't be worried that I'm going through them really, really quickly. Let me just get one of these. No, let me get this one up. Because you're gonna hear me say some words that you may or may not be familiar with, but I'm gonna just again just ensure that your mic is muted. All right. Okay. All right. So hermeneutics, that's one of the words that you're gonna hear me mention, or you may hear mentioned, or you may have heard it already. All right, and we just want to talk a quickly what hermeneutics is, so that all of us will be on the same page, right, as we go forward with the classes. So hermeneutics originated from the Greek god Hermes. This is from Greek mythology, and Hermes was supposed to be this mythical god that whenever the gods in Olympus had a message, what they would do, they would send it with Hermes. And so that's one of the places many believe this word would have originated from. Makes sense, translating the message of the gods to humans. But this is just the origin of the word, y'all. Hermeneutics is broader than the Bible. So I like to use the phrase biblical hermeneutics. It's just simply the way or the method of interpretation. And that's what I want you to get as you think about this word. So this is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about interpretation, science, the methodology that is used to interpret the Bible. This is what we're going to be talking about. And what we'll be doing, we'll be given some step-by-step guide using a Bible software program by the name of Logos. No, Logos didn't pay me to do this. I'm just doing it because I am a big fan of Logos, and I think it's really a good program. If you're interested in taking a Bible study a step further or being a little more efficient in a Bible study, you'll definitely hear me give some kudos to Logos as we go along. So in terms of interpretation, there's a literal interpretation, which is, as the word means, it's taking the Bible at face value. And let me just put all of them up on the board. What I'm going to say about all of these types of interpretation is all of them have their place, maybe not the mystical. That one is a little outlandish. But literal, there are times where the Bible is interpreted literally. There are times where it's interpreted from a moral standpoint and from an allegorical standpoint. What I will say is one should not be used as and the others discarded. There are times where the Bible does use an allegory. There are times where the emphasis is on the overall message. There are times where it's a literal interpretation. And the mystical really is when people use different verses and different texts to point to something in the future. So there's that element in biblical interpretation where something is pointing to a future fulfillment. So all of them are there, and these are just some. As I said, I want to get this out of the way because when we go through the information, I want to make sure that that we can keep up. And again, if you're not clear on anything, you could always stop and just ask a question or ask for some clarification. All right. So let me see what else I have here on this particular note. All right. So all right, I think I have that there covered. All right. So I think we could pause there and let me just quickly ask anyone if they have any questions so far, because there's one more thing I want to share. And if you have questions, let me know. All right. So you all are seeing the screen. I all see my screen. All right. All right. So let me get one more. Let me get one more slide up here. I'm going to go through this really quickly. I think this is probably one of the most salient points here that I have. If you don't get anything tonight, I want you to get this one. So what is the AIM? What is the aim of hermeneutics? Let me just get into this really quickly. What is your objective as you study the Bible? I want you all to keep this in mind. So the author's intended meaning, all right, or the author's intended purpose, some people call it. So when we read the Bible, when we study the Bible, when we seek to interpret the Bible, be reminded that the Bible was not written to us. We were not there, all right? We were not there all those years ago when the scriptures were being compiled, they were being given by God. So what we have to do then, we have to be able to put ourselves into the context or into the environment or the neighborhood of the people in the Bible. That's, looking at the culture, the history, the political setting, the economic setting, everything as much as you have available. You want to be able to put yourself then in the shoes of the audience. And this is going to bring you closer to correct interpretation, right? So we don't want to read meaning into the Bible. We want to be able to go into the setting of the Bible and then extract the meaning and get what the author intended to say, all right, to his natural or original audience. That's the main aim, and we don't want to move away from that. So some of the things you got to look at, this is what I call the neighborhood. I call it the neighborhood of the verse. I call the context the neighborhood of the verse. So all the things that are surrounding. So you're talking about the culture, you're talking about the politics, you're talking about the history, you're talking about the economy, sometimes even the geography. All of these things help put you into the setting, into the day and time and life and culture and perspective of the people in the Bible, and that's going to bring you closer to getting a correct interpretation. All right, so things like language, again, as I mentioned, culture, and I have here seeing through their eyes, not ours, because there are things that you're going to come across in the Bible, we cannot interpret it based on our understanding of it, right? A good example of that is the marriage, all right? In Matthew 25, Jesus uses the ancient, Palestine message, or marriage, sorry, which was completely different to the way we do marriages today. So putting yourself in the setting is going to help you extract and get the true meaning of everything that Jesus is saying. All right, so I have a question here, or a hand raised by Brother Kelvin. So Brother Kelvin, you go ahead. Brother Kelvin, I see you raise your hand. All right. If you're speaking, you need to unmute your mic. All right, well, the floor is open, Brother Kelvin. Whenever you figure out your mic, you can feel free to make the comments. All right, so what I want to do now, I want to share my screen, and I want to share my screen on the software that I mentioned, because I see that's what I advertise, it's how to study the Bible using Logos. So what I want to make clear here as I do this is, as I said again, before, sorry, Logos is not paying me to do this. They didn't email me and ask me to promote their software. I'm just promoting it because I want to, and because I want to convince some people to delve into this program, to get this program. A lot of preachers we know use this program, and as I said, it's really efficient when it comes to Bible study. So think of Logos as compare moving a pile of sand with a pot spoon as opposed to a shovel or a backhoe. So you could, all the stuff we're going to talk about tonight and next week, you can do those things without the Logos Bible software. So I'm not saying that this is the only way to study the Bible. You can do it without it, but think about moving a pile of sand with a pot spoon as opposed to a shovel or a backhoe. All right, both of them will get the job done, but one is going to be more efficient. All right, one is going to be able to utilize your time in the best way. And this is what I think Logos is. So we're going to, the guide we're going to use to go through how to study the Bible is a guide that is found in the Logos Bible software. However, the steps that you are taking, you can use other means to accomplish the same steps. So I want to make that abundantly clear, that I'm not advancing that this is the only way to study the Bible, or you will never do proper Bible study if you don't have Logos. That is not the message. All right. The message I have for regarding Logos is that it is really efficient. All right. User-friendly, compact, putting everything in one place that you're going to need to do some really serious and in-depth Bible study, as opposed to having multiple books, searching multiple websites. It's you could get the job done that way, but trust me, it's going to be a little longer, and I say it might not be as efficient. But if that's what you're using, fine. So what I'm going to present is simply, you could just look at it, probably compare it to what you're doing. Maybe there's a step that you don't have. Maybe there's a step that you have that I don't talk about. So feel free to share that if you come across something like that in it. But definitely, I'm gonna take a page from the book of Brother Justin, and just encourage us, if we are thinking about getting a little deeper into our Bible study, if we are already thinking about how could I improve, I want to be able to study the Bible a little bit more. I want to be able to approach the Bible and get more. I want to be more confident in studying the Bible. And you want something and you're looking for something, you're in the market for something, I'm going to encourage you to get Logos Bible software. All right. It is expensive. However, this is the word of God we're talking about. This is, the base of your spiritual growth, right? Which is getting into the word of God. And personally, I don't think there's a price that we can't pay, I mean, in the long run. I want to be sensitive of the economic situation that we are in, and everybody, and the money and all that kind of stuff. But we're talking about the word of God here, and if there's a way that you could make an investment, make the investment. But I'm not here to talk about Logos. If you want to hear more about Logos, you could call me privately, and I will tell you all about the deals and the payment plans and all that stuff. Probably Logos could give me a little side gig. I don't know. But let's get into, so this is the software here. So when you open up your page, this is what you're going to see. For those who don't have it and you're thinking about it, maybe I can woo you and persuade you by showing you all the nice shiny bells. So this is what you're going to see. Top of your screen, a little home buy, and this is your page. I have a bunch of stuff started here, guys. Some stuff that are behind on. All right, but that's all right. So this is what you're going to see when you open up. So what we are going to go, we're going to go into the guides. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go on Passage Exegesis Workflow. And that is going to open up. Let me just get this thing really big. That is going to open up our workflow. Now, just ignore what you're seeing there. I've already completed that one already. But it's going to open up our workflow. Hopefully, you're seeing it big enough. If you're on a phone, you might be struggling a little bit. But hopefully, you'll be able to see it large enough so you can see what we're doing here. So what we're going to do, we're going to actually go through a passage tonight. We're going to go through a New Testament passage. We're going to see how far we could get. I don't want to be too long because these kind of classes suffer when they are too long. So I'm going to try to, I wanted to stay within 1 hour. So hopefully what we don't cover tonight, we're going to cover it next week. And if we need another week, we'll take another week and finish it. But all of this is geared at equipping you and helping you in your ministry, helping you in your Bible study, and helping you grow as a Christian, which is my job as an evangelist anyway, to equip and to aid in any way in the growth of the church and the brethren. And this is definitely one way to do it, Bible study. So today is the 1st of December. So we're going to go in the book of Matthew because it's the first book of the New Testament. We're going to go in the New Testament book today. And we're going to go in chapter 12. And I already had a section or a pericope of scripture at 8 to 21. All right, so let's use this as our example, and we're going to go through the steps, right, as we go through the passage. All right, so what we're doing here now, as we open up the workflow is now going to go through, let me see, I think it's 9 or 11 steps. And as you see there, you have some steps that are, and they give a little detail. So we're going to go through the details and we're going to fully explain. So you can take your notes here, or I'll have the recording and you can go through the recording and go back to the steps, but you can take your notes. Even though I have this program, I still take notes. I like to just remind myself that I can still write. I don't want to lose the ability to write, y'all. So in this technology age, in this screen age, so I still write. So I want to encourage you just to take some notes of the main steps of the, like you have one here. So you could take some notes there and just mark them down. As I mentioned before, you don't need Logos to do the 11 steps that we're going to talk about during this series, but Logos has everything in one place. And again, it's just too efficient. Again, think about moving that load of sand with a pot spoon. And if you can move that load of sand with a backhoe, then, which one? I mean, the choice is obvious. But if all you have is a pot spoon, then, use your pot spoon and to God be the glory. All right, so the first step, our passage, our random passage, because it's the 1st of December, is the first book in the New Testament, which is Matthew. And the chapter is, 12 because we're the 12th month. And the pericope that I chose was verse 8 to 21. And there's a reason why I chose that, and that's because there's an Old Testament quotation in it. And that comes up in the study plan. So the first step, if you're taking the notes, in how to study the Bible is you want to become familiar with your passage. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and skim through what Logos gives you here. I'm going to just give you the step, and then I'm just going to give you, Logos guides you through the steps. So even if you're new, if you decide, hey, I'm going to get this program, and you're new to it, you could call somebody like, me, Justin, Ricky, Andy, these guys, Randy, they use Logos. They have been using it longer than me. But what Logos does, Logos guides you through the process, all right? So the first thing that you want to do, this is something that I do as well, even before, that I had Logos, or I had this particular workflow here, is the obvious thing you want to do is read your passage. So you're studying Matthew chapter 12, or whatever passage that you have before you. The boundary of your passage that you have so far is 8 to 21. You may decide later on to narrow down that boundary and make it a little bit smaller based on some of the things that you've seen, but we're just going to use this for the purpose of instruction, all right? So you want to read your passage. You want to read it, and read it again as much times as you can. One of the things that Logos mentions that I completely agree with, I don't think it's here, but when you are now going through the other steps of Bible study, when you would have read this verse multiple times, by the time you get to the steps further down, the passage would have become so familiar to you that you don't need to be going back to it. Somebody mentioned something about verse 10. You have to go back in the Bible and see what verse 10 say. That passage would have already marinated your spirit, already brined inside of you, so you know it as good as it can. So it's just gonna make the study a little more effective because you don't have to go through the passage or go back and refer to the passage multiple times. So you want to be able to read your passage multiple times. And again, to do this step, all you need is a Bible. All right. So if this is your first step, all you need at this point is a Bible and maybe a notepad. All right. Because of some of the other things that you wanna accomplish as we go further down. So it says that you begin developing your own questions and observations. So as you read your passage, you want to be observant, things that look strange. Probably there are some questions that the text has. In Matthew's case, well, I don't want to read it tonight, but yeah, Brother Roach, you're with us now?
Yeah. I've got a problem. I've got a problem now. But okay. I get you what I was getting a volume now.
Okay. But so again,
Yeah, but I've seen everything. You're talking, but I ain't nothing. I ain't more. That's movement and more movement.
All right. Well, they probably hearing me now. All right, so good. All right, man. Nice. Okay, good. So everybody's on. Nice. All right. So so you read a passage. This is what Logos has here. When studying a passage, it is important to internalize it and be able to recall details of the passage while reading and evaluating other resources, right? Such as commentaries, dictionaries, encyclopedias. So again, you don't want to be back and forth. You just want to be a little more efficient, right? Use your time. Maybe you just have an hour or half an hour. You want to be able to maximize a half an hour or 1 hour as best as you could. So reading and rereading it, getting it soaked in. So whenever I'm preparing for a sermon or a Bible class or whatever the case may be, one of the things I do a lot, I spend a lot of time on is reading the verse. Sometimes I even read the whole book if the book is not such a long book, or if the book is broken up into major sections. I try to read that section. For example, like Sunday, the lesson was on Joshua. I think I started reading from about Joshua 13, come down the road. And I read a little bit of Judges as well. So, you want to be able to read as much as possible to familiarize yourself with what you are about what you're about to study. All right. So that's going to be one of the first steps there. So what Logos has this nice little thing here where you can just click continue. So as long as you're done with your step, you can just continue. Or if your step is not relevant to the passage, then you can simply skip the step. All right. And we're going to see why in a few minutes. So just click continue. So read the passage multiple times. So here's the passage that we have here. It's about, Jesus talking about he's the Lord of the Sabbath. He heals this man on the Sabbath day. A lot of stuff comes up in this passage. There's some Old Testament stuff that comes up in the passage. So you want to read. One of the good things that Logos has with the workflow is you are able to take notes. Right here in the workflow, you're gonna be able to take notes. So if you see something, if you see X in the passage, what's gonna happen? Somebody needs to just mute. All right. Remember, I don't have no problem with you muting, just, if you had to make a comment, right? So one of the good things about Logos or using this particular software is that when you make a note, as I have here on the screen, I hope everybody can notice the little yellow tab that came up here on the side. So what Logos is going to do, Logos is going to attach whatever note I make, it's going to attach it to my preferred Bible. So whenever I open up my Bible, let me just open up my Bible just for you all to see. I use the New American Standard Bible. So let me just open it up here for you all to see. So if I make a note, I can link the note to Logos or to the workflow. And you see the little yellow tab here by the Lord of the Sabbath, right? That's because I started to make a note here. If I don't have a note to make, I just delete it like that. Anyway, so it just makes things really easy. So again, I'm trying to tempt you as much as I'm trying to show you some stuff here. All right. So you make your notes based on what you're reading. And this is our next step that you could take as well. Read the passage in multiple versions. All right. So one of the things Logos has is this Bible version comparison. And as you can see there on your screen, I have a good bunch. I don't have the King James, but this American version here, I think, is very similar to the old King James language. So what this does is different versions would translate and give you different words in different verses. Some verses, it really doesn't matter, but then you're going to get that verse like, let me give an example, 2 Timothy 2, verse 15. Plenty of us know that verse. So the King James would have study, down in the corner here, watch the AV 1873, way off to the right of your screen. Study to show yourself approved. But other versions, look at the different ways that the same verse is translated in different versions. So now let me get it a little smaller so I have all of them up on the screen here. So in the NASB, I have remind them, sorry, wrong verse. Be diligent. In the ESV, I have do your best. In the NIV, do your best. In the New Living Translation, it has work hard so that you can present yourself to God. So what it does is that different translators of the Bible, they use same Greek, but some of them break down the word a little bit more. So what in this case, what the New Living Translation does, these translators, they break down the word diligent a little bit more. So work hard. This is what the word diligent means. So the word study here doesn't actually mean to study. It means to work hard. All right. So when you get down to the verse where it says rightly dividing, or the NLT has who correctly explains the word of God, I have it highlighted there. And then you have other words, other ways it's translated, rightly handling, sorry, the LEB has, guiding the word of truth along a straight path. All right, so there's going to be some benefit in using multiple versions if you have them available. There are some free software online like Bible Hub, Blue Letter Bible, that I think is .com. They have some software and that's completely free that you could utilize these steps and you could go ahead and do that. But if you have multiple Bibles at home, I'm definitely going to advise and recommend that when you're studying a passage, read it in as much versions as you have available. And with the advent of technology today, with the phones and whatnot, you can have multiple versions on your phone. Most phones give you about at least 15 versions for free. So you could afford to do this step with no ease. So far, all these steps here, you can do it for free. And it's going to be really, really simple. But as you go further, step number 2 is you want to explore the larger context of the passage. So Logos has a note here, I'm going to read it. Understand your passage better by examining its larger context. I call context the neighborhood, all right? Where does the verse come from? What's surrounding the verse? That's what I like to call context, neighborhood. Beginning by reading the text before and after your passage. Now, in some cases, this could be beneficial, but in some cases, it's not really beneficial. Like when you read some books, some chapters in Proverbs, that's not going to be too helpful. Some of the Psalms, there are some books where it's not really helpful, not as helpful as others. Then there are some books that you're studying, you might need to read the entire book. I remember some months ago, I did a lesson from the book of Malachi, and I had to study the whole book of Malachi. Although the lesson was from chapter 3, I went ahead and just, because the whole book is one message. There are some books that have natural separations, and you can use that. But then there are some books where the separations are not really there, like some of those minor prophets. And you just have to take the whole thing. And at least I would advise, if you're seeking, again, if your aim is to understand the author's intended meaning, then this is what you're going to do. So, Bible study, the more serious you take it, it's going to take more time, but the benefits are going to be immense. So take the time to do proper Bible study, right? And it's going to be, greatly beneficial to your life, to your understanding. All right. So studying the textual, historical, cultural context helps you determine what the passage might have meant to the biblical audience. You see what Logos is saying here, and I completely agree. This is what I teach. This is what I believe. We always seek to find out what it meant to the biblical audience first. Then seek application for yourself, all right, or for whoever you're teaching. But your aim should always be to find out what it meant to the biblical audience. Because sometimes people, for instance, and one of the books that gets abused with this is the book of Revelation. People go into the book of Revelation and they come to conclusions. One of the ones that has came to me recently, I spent like 4 weeks, me and Ricky, 4 weeks we spent so far in prison talking about this. Is Aline is my witness. She's not here, but she's my witness to that. And who believe that the mark of the beast is the vaccine. And one of the points I keep stressing there is go back to what it meant to the original audience. And obviously, it wasn't a vaccine. So it just goes to show that, when we take the right steps, we could come to the proper conclusion. All right. So exploring the larger context, a part of that is reading what came before. So if I'm studying, like our passage here is Matthew 12, 8 to 21, I may want to start from Matthew 12, chapter verse 1. See what came before. See what comes after. See what comes in the chapter before or the chapter after. Maybe there's some links you won't know until you read it and see for yourself. So that's what you want to do to rightly handle the word of God. And of course, if you have more material that you could look at some other stuff, from a geographical standpoint, historical, cultural, like some encyclopedias, and go ahead and use it and see what you can and gain from the overall context. So some of the desired outcomes, you will understand the larger context of your passage and avoid drawing conclusions that don't fit the context. That right there is it. All right. You don't want to come to a place where you are drawing conclusions that has nothing to do with what the passage is saying. Let me give you a good example of that. Ephesians 5:19, where it talks about speaking to yourself, psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. What's interesting about that text is that the verse before is the command. And I know we talk about, that you have to sing, in worship and all that kind of stuff, which is all well and good. But the command is actually in verse 18, all right, which is be filled with the Spirit. And so sometimes broadening, your scope can help you get a proper understanding of the text so that when you come to make your application could be correct. Because if your interpretation is wrong, your application is going to be wrong as well, all right? So you want to try your best to understand the background of your passage as best as possible, all right? So I have some extra notes there. I'm not going to read it. So now that you are done with that part of the step, exploring the larger context, some of the ways you can do that, and this is where Logos comes in now. Some of the ways you could explore the larger context is by, looking at the boundaries of the passage. Let me just open up this tool here, compare pericopes. I don't use this all the time, but it comes in handy sometimes, because what happens, as I mentioned before, the Bible didn't originally have chapters and verses. All right. The Bible was just words. And I am grateful to the guy that decided, hey, we need to break up this Bible so that it will be easier for people to read. I'm thankful for that guy. So what this tool does, this passage analysis tool, what it does, it shows us how different translations separate the passage. All right. So it can help you have a clearer idea as to where the context begins and where it ends. So for instance, some people, the Lord of the Sabbath, that starts in verse 8. Some break it up, like this ESV here and the NLT, some break it up, a little more than that. Some, all this is doing is just helping the person who is studying the Bible have a better idea as to what they are looking at. Where did Jesus start the conversation? Did he, like, for instance, let me give you a good example of that. In the book of John, we are all familiar with John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. All of us know that verse, but not many times do we consider that this was said in a conversation with Nicodemus that began in John 3 verse 1 and following. Remember, Nicodemus came to Jesus by night and he said, you must be born again. He is still having that conversation. And so sometimes we don't put those two together. And there are many examples of that. Another example of that is in the book of Hebrews. Now, for instance, what the Hebrew writer does is he presents Old Testament passages and then he goes on a long explanation of the passage. So for example, in Hebrews chapter 8, he goes into, let me get my Bible for that one. He goes into a discussion there regarding the law, right? And how the law was obsolete and all that kind of stuff. But so while our English Bibles have chapter 8, chapter 9, and chapter 10, that thought that began in Hebrews 8 verse 7 actually ends all the way in chapter 10, early chapter 10, right? But our Bibles have chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 10, and all the different verses. But if you look at it from a thematic standpoint, it starts in chapter 8 verse 7 and ends in chapter 10, right? So sometimes, using these tools is just going to help you again. It's just going to help you build the context so that you will know what you are looking at when you begin to study. So that when you're studying, so when you're jumping and you say, right, I hear what Travel say, I'm going and study John chapter 4 and verse 24 tomorrow. God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him. And we're going to study that passage. That your devotional passage you're going to study. Knowing the larger context is going to inform you that to understand that passage, you need to begin with the conversation Jesus had with the woman, which began earlier in chapter 4, which is from chapter 4, verse 1. Right? So instead of just going in chapter 4, verse 24, and God is spirit, they that worship him, you go off on a tangent on that, you're going to remember, hey, I need to remember that this flows from the conversation and the experience that Jesus had with this woman and all that kind of stuff, and everything is going to follow suit. This is what context is all about. So all these preachers that are here talk about context. This is why they are talking about it. Because if we don't keep a passage in this context, we're going to come to the wrong conclusion. Any questions so far? Anybody have any questions so far? Is everything clear so far? I did warn you that the nature of this class is going to be instructional. So take your notes. So don't get bored. Don't fall asleep on me, please. But I promise you it's going to be beneficial if you can get all the steps and find time to utilize them. And the more you use it, is the easier it's going to come. So when I started, my journey in hermeneutics, I could tell you it was a pain. It was a pain. I would spend months, I tell you, months trying to figure out stuff. But the more familiar I got with the steps, I was able to go through it a little bit quicker. I was more familiar with it. I knew what I was doing when I came to the Bible. I think that was the main turning point for me. You see, when you approach the Bible and you don't know what to do, that's frustrating. All right. So what these steps are going to do is just going to put you in a place where I know what I'm doing it's like when you get a job for the first time and there are people on the job that have to show you the ropes. But the more familiar you get with your task, nobody has to show you the ropes. You could fly through those tasks in a jiffy. Not that I want you to run through the Bible in a jiffy. But you understand what I'm saying? You're going to become more familiar. It's going to be easier. Your confidence is going to grow. And you're not going to be too turned off when it comes to Bible study. You might even be excited. You know, you might have people complaining that you study the Bible too much. You know, make time for me. That kind of stuff. All right. But hopefully it's going to bring about that zeal and that joy in you to make you want to go to the Bible a little bit more. All right. And if you're doing that already, may it abound even more. All right. So the propositional outline, I don't want to get into this part. This is one of the features of Logos and one of the more expensive packages. Let me see that part. I don't want you to say I'm gonna get the cheap package in the morning, and then you do have it, and then you come complaining to Travel that, hey, Travel, I went and get Logos and I do have this feature. I tell you, no. As you upgrade your packages, you're gonna get more features, and usually you're upgrading because you have outgrown your package. You have been studying so much that you want more, and your package that you have, it's just cannot cut it anymore. So you're gonna upgrade it, right? And that's usually when you decide to upgrade the Logos package, right? Maybe I'll talk a little bit about the packages later on, so you could have an idea, or you could go and visit their website, logos.com, and see it for yourself. But the propositional outline, I use this sometimes, but I'm just gonna say this is a little more advanced. So I'm gonna skip this one for now. This is a little more advanced, and it gets into syntax and sentence construction and all that kind of stuff. Though that is important, if you start off in Bible study, you may want to just do go and frustrate yourself with this, right? And this step is this tool is a really good tool that Logos has. We get into that probably when we do the Old Testament part of it. All right, so to examine the cultural context, of course, Logos has their data sets. So in this one, the cultural concepts that this is the nice thing about Logos. If you're doing this on your own, you have to go on Google or go in your table of contents or your index in your book and look up all these things individually. What Logos does, Logos already has a passage on top here, Matthew 12, 8-21. And it takes all of the cultural concepts that it finds based on the algorithm that they have. It takes all of them, and here they are. And you can now click, let's see, chosen one. Let's see what the concept was around chosen one. And then you're going to open up a whole big thing here. And you can then go and research the phrase or the ideology of the chosen one. And they have all these different things. And Logos is going to search your library. And every single article that Logos finds in your library that's related to this, it's going to show it to you. All right. And that's why I said Logos is studying the Bible using a barcode. It's going to be more efficient. All right. Everything is right here at your fingertips. So you could go into all your books, any media that it has. If somebody did a sermon on it, it's going to show up in this little tab down on the bottom here. The bookstore is going to recommend books that you could buy that may have more information if you so desire. Like here you have Legend of the Jews and Apocryphal New Testament. And it's going to show you books that have something that may be related to this. That if you're really, if you're really good, want to get into your study. But most cases, you just want a basic understanding of it. So here you have healing. That's a cultural concept because the man was healed by Jesus. The indwelling of the Spirit comes up because they accuse Jesus about, to working through Beelzebub and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to go through all the concept that it finds in the text, and you're going to be able to research all of these individually, all right? So this takes time. But so all this is part of examining the cultural context, all right? This is a step I would advise you not to skip, because as long as you're studying the Bible, you are entering into a different cultural setting. So it is good that you familiarize yourself as much as you can with the cultural setting. It's going to help you, right, appreciate what the writer is saying. A good example of this is in Ephesians chapter 6, where he talks about children obey parents in the law, for this is right. It talks about husbands and fathers, sorry, don't provoke your children to wrath. And one of the cultural things that is helpful in really appreciating the command that Paul gave was that the head of the home, the husband, he had authority to basically treat his wife and children as property. So now he's a Christian, and so he has to change his perspective. He can't now treat his wife and children as property. All right, he has to treat them in a different way because he's a Christian. So knowing the cultural setting is going to give you that information, and it's going to now help you deepen your appreciation for what Paul is saying. So you're going to understand a little more clearly why Paul is saying some of the things he's saying, or why the writer rather is saying some of the things he's saying, why he's saying it, but the force he is saying it. This is the importance of examining the cultural context. And of course, we have here, wait, let me just continue because we did this step. All right, so now we have the historical context. I love this tool. I love history, so I love this tool. Let me open up this tool for you. This is the timeline tool that Logos has. And what this tool is, as you probably could see on your board, it's probably going to be a little bit small. This tool is going to tell you, or at least it's going to show you all, as much as possible, what is known, but all of the known historical things that was happening at the same time with the events that you are seeing in the book of study. So for instance, I was in my sermon on Sunday from Joshua, I was looking at some of the things that was happening in the world during the time of Joshua, because remember the Bible, it gives us history, but the Bible is not a historical book. The Bible is a theological book. So there are things that were happening in Egypt. There were things that were happening in Canaan. There were things that were happening in other parts of the world while these events were taking place in the days of Joshua. So sometimes this tool comes in really handy because maybe you might see the people behave a certain way or react a certain way, but then you get a little piece of news that this was happening at the time. This person was ruling at the time. And then they're going to be like, oh, that's why they were behaving like that. That's why they said this and that kind of thing. So the timeline tool is and if you're a history buff or a history nerd, then you're going to love this tool because it's just going to put you now into the day and time. And it's not just going to tell you what's happening in the Bible time, but it's also going to tell you what's happening in the world at the time. So I love this tool. So if you're a history buff, get Logos and get this tool because you're not really going to get this in books. All right, this is one of the tools that is going to be really difficult to get in books, and the books that will have it, most of them are going to be super expensive. I'm talking about in the hundreds to get this kind of information. So again, really, really good tool. But historical context in our case, the historical context may not be too relevant to trying to exegete this passage. All right, so we're just gonna skip this. Now, this step here is gonna be important. Number 3, examine types of literature. All right, so as you study the Bible, it's very important that you recognize that there are different types of works, literature, genre. There are different types of literary works in the Bible, and they don't all have the same rules of interpretation. I made reference to Revelation earlier. The way you interpret Revelation is going to be different to the way you interpret this passage that we're looking at right now, Matthew 12, 8 to 21. All right, you have some narrative inside of there. All right, you have some dialogue inside of there, but it's going to be different when you get to a book like Revelation, where it's talking about this great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be completely different. Let me give you a good example of this. A couple years ago, there was a news story that broke. There was this guy, he was arrested, I think by the CIA, for making threats towards the president and making terroristic threats. And when they arrested him and interrogated him, his defense was, I was singing a rap song. And they were able to ascertain that he was indeed writing a rap song. And so they let him go. He was released, no charges. And what made the difference, it was what was deemed as threats, it was in a particular genre, right? Which was a song. And so the way you interpret a song is gonna be different than interpreting a dialogue. Now, if he was on a phone call with somebody, planning and telling the person, you know what, I'm gonna do this, and at this particular time, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do whatever, that's a different scenario. That's in the context of a phone call. But this was in the context of a rap song. So they determined that, with the, literary license that they have in doing songs, fine, and they let him go. So that just goes to show that even today, in our modern setting, we understand and we interpret different types of genre, differently. And we have a teacher here tonight, and she could tell you that the way she looks at a poem or a piece of prose or a song or whatever the case may be, is going to be different as we look at the different types of literature. So in the Bible, this is one of the steps that I would also advise you, don't skip this step. Know the type of literature that you are looking at. You have prophecy, you have narrative, you have songs, you have poems, you have epics, you have parables, in the gospel, you have parables. All of them have different rules. You can't approach all of them in the same way. So what I would advise you is, if you can't get Logos, try and find a book. Probably go on Amazon and see if you could find a book on Bible genre. If you get, most books on Bible genre are pretty safe. They don't advance any kind of doctrine in the book. So pretty safe books. So any book on biblical genre is going to be a beneficial book to your library. And if you could find one, that is going to be super, super, super handy. So in this step, you want to examine the type of literature. And again, what Logos does this for me. So Logos tells me, in this case, this is a narrative story, this is expository. This is pretty much what makes up chapter 12, all right? Expository or a narrative story. So Jesus is either explaining things or there's a narrative of some kind that's going on in the text. So Logos, again, I don't have to get anything extra. Logos just does this for me and makes it super, super easy. All right, so literary types. So you have narrative, you have quotations, and they get pretty detailed, but basically you have narrative and basically you have a quotation in the text. And those are the ones that you want to highlight in the text. And if you go in Matthew 12, you're going to realize that there's a quotation given there, and you want to be mindful to note that and to note where it comes from and why he highlights it. All right, so examine the commands in the text. Now, here's where you're going to have to go into the Bible study a little bit deeper, but we're not going to go into this tonight because this is a little bit deeper. But sometimes you have commands in the text. Sometimes you have questions. You have, different types of verbs and all that kind of stuff. But we're not going to get into that tonight because we're going to get into some more in-depth stuff that's probably definitely going to put you to sleep if you're not ready for it. All right, so these are just some things that you need to look at as you explore the type of literature that you're reading. So is the person asking a question? Are they giving a command? Are they speaking about something in the present? Are they speaking about something in the past? Are they speaking about something in the future? These are things that you want to notice as you look at your text. All right, so again, he has an examine question. So one of the questions in the text is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So you want to note this question when you're studying. And you want to note how Jesus answers the question. You also want to note if Jesus answers the question, because that becomes significant. Because in the trial with Pilate asked a question that Jesus didn't answer. All right, so we have here in the chat, bro, we are not asleep. Very interesting topic. All right, great. And I appreciate that, Sister Carmen, because I know how I get sometimes, especially if I'm talking about something that I like, I keep going. And sometimes I don't even notice that if somebody's sleeping. And it's even harder to do that on Zoom. Let me give you a funny preacher story. There was one time I was preaching in I wouldn't name the congregation I was preaching in, but I was preaching in this congregation, and I noticed this brother sleeping. He was in the front row. Now, let me just give you a little tip. If you're planning to sleep on the preacher, don't sit down in the front, please. All right, sit down in the back. But anyway, this guy was up in front and he fell asleep about 3 times during the sermon. I was like, man, why traveling to re-examine this presentation? My phone asleep. So then at the end of the lesson, we all meeting and greeting each other and whatever the case may be. He comes up to me, he says, brother, I had a little problem with your sermon. I was like, what's the problem? Your sermon was a bit disjointed. You know, you may want to work on you know, how you bring across your point, because I thought this sermon was a bit disjointed. I'm watching him like, maybe I will like, well, I mean, I didn't tell him this. I was thinking it though. I was thinking maybe if he didn't fall asleep 3 times, it would not have been disjointed. But I said, thanks. But that's a funny sleeping story. I don't know why I said that. But anyway, you know, we preachers sometimes just blurt out random stories. But anyway, this is what you want to do as you think about the type of literature. Examine the questions, examine if he's given a command. Is he speaking about something in the past, present, or future? Keep that in mind. Then you also want to look at figurative language. What in the world is figurative language, right? So the Bible is full of figurative language, metaphors, similes, idioms, euphemisms, and the list goes on. If you could also find a book on figurative or figures of speech in the Bible, that's going to be a good book to put in your library as well. And the Bible uses them a lot, right? So sometimes we see somebody and they say, boy, me see you in ages. We don't literally mean that we didn't see them in ages. We're just trying to emphasize that it's been a long time since I saw you, right? So we use that type of language today. And the Bible uses this type of language. Now, it gets really technical at times. There are some really, really technical ones, like when they get into what's the ones I forgot. Maybe Mark will tell me. Where the container is substitute for the contain, figures of speech, figures of omission, figures of substitution, and that kind of stuff. But we're not going to get into all of that. We'll do that in a class that talks about figures of speech in the Bible. But you want to be able to notice when the Bible uses figures of speech. Like, for instance, when Jesus says, hate mother and father, is he literally telling you to hate your mother and father? No. If you interpret that literally, then you're going to come into problems, because how could Jesus be telling people to hate? Then they're going to realize, nah, this is probably an exaggeration, all right? He's using it to show that you need to love me more than them, and probably that's the explanation behind it. But definitely, you want to be on the lookout for figurative language in the Bible, figures of speech in the Bible. There are a lot, all right? There are too much to talk about. But what Logos does, again, Logos, with the algorithm that they have, they would take my passage and show me every single figure of speech that is found in the text, all right? And I can sort them by type, all right? I could sort them by target, who is directed to, category. So here in the category, I'll see that there are some metaphors, and then they go to break down the types of metaphors and all that kind of metonymy. That's the thing I was trying to get at. And then it's going to show you what the metonymy was. When he says stretch out your hand, he wasn't just saying in your hand, but your whole arm, that kind of thing. You know, so I think if you're really interested in taking your Bible study a step further, then this is the software that you want to get. You want to invest in. If you're here and you're listening and you're preaching or you're teaching, or you're a preacher or teacher in the congregation, I would highly advise that you get this software, because if you could get a better grasp of passages and themes and doctrines of the Bible, you will be able to instruct and feed the congregation in a more effective way. So for leaders, all my preaching buddies that I talk to, I encourage them, I bother them, I harass them to get Logos, especially if you're in that role where you're teaching on a regular basis, then you need to get this, all right? So that you could be more effective in your Bible study, all right? So that's the third step. So we're done with the third step. So the third step was, let's go back up a little bit, explore the types of literature. Let me see if we can get to the fourth step, and we'll probably stop here. I don't want to go more than an hour. But identify people and other beings in the passage. So you want to notice while you're reading. So let's just review really quickly. So the first step was to be familiar with your passage, read it, read multiple versions. Explore the larger context was step number 2, where you're looking at the boundaries of your passage, you're looking at the culture, the history. The third step was explore types of literature in your passages. If it's a parable, if it's a prophecy, if it's a letter, if it's a poem, if it's a song, identify what you're reading. The fourth step, as you read, you also want to identify the characters that are in the passage. That's important, because sometimes who you think the author is addressing is not who the author is addressing. All right. And so this is really, this one is important too. Know who the passage is talking about. Know if angels are in the passage, if deities in the passage, if there's a prophet, if there's some king, who is in the passage, what role are they playing in the passage. So when we look at our text here, Matthew 28, who's in the passage? Jesus, he's in the passage, right? We have the man whose hand was withered. He comes up in the passage. The Pharisees, but the Pharisees went out, verse number 14. So they are in the passage as well. If I'm not mistaken, somewhere along the line, the disciples asked for an explanation. I think it's before, somewhere there along the lines. Right, the disciples became hungry. So this is the backdrop of it. So they are also, some people that are mentioned as well in the passage. Then later on, that's if you go further down, the Pharisees bring up Beelzebub and demons. So they are in the passage as well. So knowing who's in your passage becomes important, because you want to be sure to that you get the right conclusion. You want to know who's talking and who they're talking to at different times. Sometimes Jesus may be talking to his disciples, and it may appear that he's talking to somebody else. You want to be clear on who is there so that you know who's being addressed, because sometimes it impacts how you understand the passage. So most passages include references to people and other living beings. Here in this step, we want to identify the living entities mentioned in the passage and explore the rules that they play. All right. So that's what you want to do. So this is a pretty easy step. You don't need any major tools to do this. Just take your time and read your passage, and you are going to see this come out. All right. Any passage in the Bible, who are the characters in the passage? Who are the characters in the story, if you want to look at it that way? All right. What role they play, what they are doing. Do they say anything? Is anything done to them? Is anything said to them? These are some things that you want to know about. So the biblical writers generally assume their audience had the relevant background knowledge of these people and their rules. We don't have that. We don't live in Bible times. We don't know what a high priest did on a daily. We don't know that. We don't know what a Roman soldier did, right? We don't know these things. So that's why going back into the culture, learning about it is going to help you better put yourself in the shoes of the audience and better understand the context. And knowing the people that are involved in the passage, that's going to help. So again, Logos helps you with this. All the biblical people, Jesus, the man with the withered hand, the Pharisees, and all the different people that are mentioned. Logos is going to give you some data sets that are going to give you all the information that you need. Ruling parties, that becomes important. They impact the passage. Supernatural beings, of course, that will be God. And in this case, we're looking at spiritual beings. You maybe even want to look at the demons or Beelzebub that was mentioned a little bit further down the road. All right. So we're going to pause here. We have gone through 4 steps tonight. So just to recap, we have gone through become familiar with your passage, read your passage in multiple versions, multiple times, explore the larger context, read what came before, read what goes after. In some cases, you may want to read the whole book, like in cases like Joel and Philemon and books like Timothy and Titus. Just go ahead and read the whole book. All right. I was telling Lydia the other day, there was some book Lydia was studying. I can't remember the book. And I was telling her, I said, Lydia, trust me on this one. Read that whole book without stopping. And it's going to change the way you look at the book. I don't know. Lydia, you could probably put it in the chat. I can't remember the book. But some book I was reading, and I told her, read the whole book and tell me if you don't see this passage in a different light. And in some cases, you know, that's really helpful. That's all you need to really grasp what the passage is saying. The third step we looked at was exploring the types of literature. You may want to take a note if there's something that's completely strange, like you go in the book of Revelation and you see this 7-headed dragon. You want to take a note of that. And you want to ask yourself, well, was this a real dragon? Or was he symbolizing something here? So you want to take note of that. Let me see if later put it in the chat. Now, it was a book from the Bible. I think Colossians or some book. I don't remember the book. It was one of those short books there. So you want to notice any passages, any things that seem too strange. Philippians. All right, Philippians. That was the book, Philippians. Right? You want to notice if there are any literary devices that are being used in the book. All right. When Jesus said, go tell that fox, speaking about Herod, that's a figure of speech there. You want to notice any commands, any questions, anybody, what they are saying, the identifying people and other beings in the text. Who are the people? Are they significant people? Like in the case of Jesus' crucifixion, there was Pilate. He was a significant figure in the Roman government. Are there any supernatural beings? Is God in the text? Are there angels in the text? Are there demons in the text? Are there different people in the text? What are they doing? What are they saying? Who are they talking to? Is anything being said to them? These are some things that you want to ask the text. So what I want you to do for a little homework is to find any passage in the New Testament, preferably something that you're familiar with, so you won't get too confused, and try and apply these 4 steps to that passage and see if you are a little bit better off in your Bible study. So I want you to take a passage this week or passages and try and go through these 4 steps that we mentioned here, become familiar with the passage, explore the larger context and types of literature, identify people. Try it out. As I said, the more you practice it, is the better you're gonna get, and the more familiar you're gonna get with the steps. So your efficiency is gonna increase, right? The more familiar you are. All right, so I'm gonna stop here. Let me stop the screen share, and let me go ahead and say goodbye to those who would view this recording.